As a member of the LGBTQ plus community, coming out is never easy. But when you're a trans man or trans woman, that adds another layer. Oftentimes, they can come out as gay or lesbian and still feel like something is missing. However, they may not have the terms or even understand what that something is. In part 2 of our 3-part series, we rejoin Shane, Janae, Rel, and Jenny as they figure out who they are and go through the process of coming out. If you could go back to talk to that 16-year-old in that library, what would you say?
There's hope. It'll be okay. Don't give up.
For those in the transgender community, life as a young child, still trying to find out who they are, can be isolating. For trans woman Jenny Gunn, figuring it out was one of the loneliest moments in her life.
I was done. Luckily, I didn't take my life, but if I could have, I probably would have that day.
For Jenny, growing up in the 70s in Texas, where societal expectations didn't allow for people to explore their gender, talking about being gay just wasn't something you did. The term trans, not even thought of. So instead of reaching out, she pushed those feelings further in the closet.
It's brutal. Who are you gonna tell? I mean, not my family, not my friends. I mean, I'm running in crowds that my best friends are all athletes. Who are you gonna tell that to? My coaches? No. So just sucked it up, lived with it.
An approach many in the trans community take, delaying or even denying trying to understand what they feel out of fear for how society, but more importantly, family and friends will react.
You're afraid of what you're gonna lose. It's petrifying. The fear of loss is brutal.
For Shane Lane, who grew up in the 2000s in South Carolina, where resources weren't readily available, similar fears delayed his journey. By 6th grade, Shane pushing his thoughts away thanks to bullying.
I've already been picked on, been called lesbian, didn't even know what that was. Now knowing what it is, I'm like, okay, well, am I that because of this and that, and just figuring it out from there. So I did not even start thinking trans again until maybe like late college, if not after college.
For Shane, joining a queer organization in college would help him learn the terms for what he'd been feeling all his life. First coming out as lesbian, then bisexual, before realizing after he graduated that still something was missing.
Then when I moved back in, I still felt like something was being hidden. Like I felt like I was still that kid in high school trying to hide things from their parent. But I'm thinking like, I just went to college.
One night though, everything finally clicked. 23 years into his life, watching the movie The Perks of Being a Wallflower, it all made sense. Its message that it's okay to be you, despite what others expect.
I was like, I think I know what this is now. Like, I think this is trans. Like, and that was probably the first time like I actually said it out loud to myself, was December 2018. So it's now like I'm having to, I felt so free in that moment. Like I felt like a weight had been taken off. Like I finally felt the most just me.
With that realization though, came the thought of what comes next. The harrowing decision of whether to come out, and if so, who to come out to. Shane, being a comedian, picked an open mic night. The pressure of coming out to complete strangers, far less than that of those who knew him. But most don't have that. Rel Lowry, who is trans, spent most of his early adult life as a lesbian, so coming out again gave him hesitation.
At that time, I still didn't know, how my family was going to react, because there's a whole different ball game coming out to your family as being a lesbian or being gay versus being trans.
As Rel says, he had to build up the courage to tell his family he was not only a trans man, but was also taking medicine as part of his transitioning process. The toughest one to tell, his mom. For weeks, he put it off, lying that his deepened voice from added testosterone was because he had a cold. Until one day, he finally got the courage to tell her. She didn't even bat an eye. Her main concern, his safety.
Her first response was, I just want you to make sure that you're going to the right doctors so that you're making sure that you're doing it the right way. Follow the procedures, because at the end of the day, whatever you decide to do, I support you, but I don't want you to do it, illegally, or where you're not letting the doctors make sure that your numbers are good, because at the end of the day, you're supposed to bury me, I'm not supposed to bury you.
And it wasn't just his mom that ended up feeling that way, it was his whole family.
So when I tell you the reason I do these stories is because of the support that I have. It's not a joke. I'm beyond thankful, beyond blessed to have the support system that I have, because I don't take that for granted.
It's something he doesn't take for granted, because for trans people, no matter when they come out, acceptance by parents and family isn't guaranteed. But according to Bethany Corrigan, executive director of Transcend Charlotte, it should be, especially for youth who are brave enough to come out to their parents.
That moment in time, that gift that you're given, where your kid comes to you and confides in you and literally opens up their little heart box and says, here is something vulnerable about me. That's a moment that you will not get back.
As Corrigan explains, if there's not acceptance and affirmation, not only do the rates for suicide and drug abuse go up, but a relationship could be lost forever.
I am begging you, do not throw that moment away, because that could be the moment that further cements the way that your relationship with that person will go for the rest of their life.
For Shane, his mom accepted him immediately, but she still had to get used to him.
So it obviously took some time to get there. Being 23 years and she calling me she and daughter and the dead name and all of that, it definitely took some time to get used to, but that's all it needed was time.
For Janae Wright, her journey of acceptance took longer. After her parents didn't embrace her as a queer child in high school, she ran away from home. But when she came out as trans in college while living with her sister, she wanted to tell her parents.
I don't care about nothing else, because your family is what's more important, not the friends and people that don't matter. You want those people that, your core people, especially your parents, at least to know, or you just want to get that out the way because it's on your conscience.
First, she came out to mom, and she explains that relationship is still a work in progress. But then she decided to seek out her father, the same man who used to hit her when Janae showed feminine traits.
I was ready for him to knock me silly, but instead he picked me up like this, and we took a picture by the lake. It was amazing, because all I wanted to feel that is I'm somebody's daughter. I just wanted to feel that you're my little girl, daddy's little girl.
For Jenny, a similar thing happened. Coming out as trans much later in her life after 2 marriages and children, mom disowned her. But dad, a Vietnam veteran who she says was homophobic earlier on in his life, took a different path. Jenny texting him on his birthday, which led to a phone call she'll never forget.
I went out back and he said, I'm proud of you. And we talked, and he was extremely supportive. And he said, I want to come see you. I want to come see my daughter.
The same girl who almost took her own life because of fears of losing the love of her loved ones now had her dad as one of her biggest supporters, because as she went on a journey, he did too. His second wife, having LGBTQ plus members in her family, opening up his eyes and his heart to accept his own daughter.
We've got an amazing father-daughter relationship, and he doesn't dead name me. He's never asked weird questions. He just immediately accepted. and it's not changed one bit.
Now, although with Jenny, Janae, Shane, and Rel, all 4 of them got at least some acceptance from their parents, getting accepted in society wasn't necessarily the same story. In our final part of our 3-part series, we'll take a look at the stigma that surrounds being trans and the problems that trans men and women face just living their lives.